and a lot of poverty, a lot of anger. And so the police force would just go out there and they're supposed to keep these people under control. And we're in Philadelphia specifically, your early police officers were recruited from the gangs. So these people, one day they were gang warring on the street, the next day you put them in uniforms and tell them to keep order. And then you didn't have, okay, today we have police academies doing a little better. Well, I mean, they didn't have any training. You just give them weapons and tell them to keep the peace. That's what they're supposed to do. Keep the peace. But how do you do that? And then you have racism, and not only racism, but particularly in Philadelphia, you had a lot of ethnic fighting, between the Italians, the Jews, the Germans. You got all this stuff going on, and people trying to protect themselves and their little areas. All right, so you have we call turf wars. All right, so if you have police recruited from a certain community, they're going to try to protect that community. So are they keeping the peace, or are they just really another level of gang warring and protecting their turf? Right? So you have all of these things, and the firemen were even worse. They were worse than the police. And then you would have fights between the firemen and the police, and then the firemen would set things on fire and refuse to put them out. And here come the police. Oh yeah, they had all kinds of things going on. In Philadelphia, they even set fire to a little orphanage, a little black orphanage. And the fire people refused to put it out, and the police wouldn't make them. What he makes you think about move, right?
Can you explain more about that incident with the orphanage?
Yeah, well, every time when we say riot all the way up to 1960, what we're saying is white people were coming into the black community and wreaking havoc. Okay. And so in one of those instances in Philadelphia, you have whites coming into the black neighborhood and doing awful things, destroying. I read one account where they defaced the black church because they said black people make too much noise. And there was a coffin in there. They threw the coffin out the window. And then they set an orphanage ablaze. I don't know. There's no account about how many kids were killed or who got out. The record says the orphanage was set ablaze, and then the fire people didn't put it out hastily. And then also those houses were wooden. They were burned very fast, and so yeah, it was a lot. So then you had a police caught in between that. So even if you have police officers who were truly, truly trying to maintain the peace and try to maintain order, you were caught. It was just a lot of chaos going on at that time.
It seems like the police always started out as a lawless entity.
Basically, still is, and a lot of that I wouldn't say is really the fault of the police, but the fault of policing.
Explain.
And yeah, because the most of the rules that the police have to follow are crafted by the courts. And when does that happen? Usually after the fact. So a lot of times they don't really know. I had an example. Now, New York is one of the first cities that if you want to sue the police officers have to actually pay instead of the city paying. Right. Yeah, right. And so I was in New York. Just casually, I would ask different officers about that, and none of them knew anything about it.
They're not even up to date on
They
it.
no. They said no, they didn't hear anything about it. They didn't know about that rule or what it meant.
Well, that makes sense though, because I'm pretty sure they have a high rate of lawsuits. 'Cause I think Philly, last time I checked, they were like at 16 million
Wow,
on
yeah.
since it's like in a 2-year span.
I guess Los Angeles has the highest, but Philadelphia is not far behind.
Majority of
New
them,
York.
majority of them never make the news. Majority of the settlements and
Right,
lawsuits.
right. And even though we only have a fraction of the population that New York has in terms of brutality and students, we're almost par to that city.
All right.